I was clearing plates at my mom's Christmas party, balancing dishes while guests laughed and clinked glasses when my stepfather's voice boomed across the room. "The maid doesn't need to stand here. Get back to the kitchen." He pointed at me, his smirk daring anyone to challenge him. The room froze, eyes darting my way, some snickering, others pretending not to hear. That moment burned into me not with shame, but with fire. I wasn't just some nobody he could dismiss. I decided right then to turn his world upside down. His words were meant to break me, but they built me instead. I'd make him choke on that smirk, force him to greet me every morning at his own office, where I'd hold the keys to his future. If you've ever been humiliated by someone close, drop your story in the comments and hit subscribe to see how I made my stepfather bow to me. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 30 years old, I've learned the hard way that family isn't always what you expect, especially when your stepfather treats you like you're beneath him. Growing up in a small Tennessee town, I spent my childhood in my mom's sewing shop, threading needles and hemming dresses to help pay the bills. Mom Susan worked her fingers raw to keep us afloat after Dad left when I was 7. We weren't rich. Most months we scraped by on a few $100s, but we had each other. I started working at 15, folding clothes and sweeping floors after school, saving every penny for a future I knew I'd have to build myself. Mom always said I had her grit, and I clung to that even when life got harder. When I was 16, Mom married Richard Bennett, a big-shot media exec from Chicago who swept into our lives promising stability. He had money, a flashy car, and a daughter, Jennifer, 2 years younger than me, who looked at me like I was dirt on her designer shoes. Richard moved us to a bigger house in town, paid off Mom's debts, and acted like he owned us. At first, I thought he'd be a father figure, someone to guide me, but I was wrong. He'd bark orders like I was his personal assistant, telling me to fetch his coffee or clean up after dinner while Jennifer smirked and scrolled her phone. "You're good at this servant stuff," he'd say, chuckling as if it were a joke. It wasn't. Mom would glance away, her silence cutting deeper than his words, and I'd swallow my anger, not wanting to upset her. Despite the tension, I threw myself into school. I was determined to make something of myself, to prove I wasn't the nobody Richard thought I was. I earned straight A's even while working double shifts at a local diner to cover textbooks and gas. My senior year, I applied for scholarships to the University of Tennessee, dreaming of a degree in computer science. I got in with partial funding, a miracle for a kid like me, but it wasn't enough. So I juggled 3 jobs: barista at dawn, library clerk by day, and waitress at night. I lived on energy drinks and 4 hours of sleep, coding late into the night, driven by the thought of financial freedom, a life where no one could look down on me. My roommate Lisa Morgan became my rock, telling me I was tougher than anyone she knew. "You're gonna outshine them all," she'd say, and I held on to her words when Richard's voice echoed in my head. After graduation, I landed freelance tech gigs, building websites, optimizing ad algorithms, and saved enough to move to Chicago at 26. I wanted to be closer to Mom, hoping distance had softened Richard's edges. It hadn't. Their new condo in downtown Chicago screamed wealth: marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows. But it felt colder than our old Tennessee shack. Every visit, Richard found ways to remind me I didn't belong. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence to hand me dirty plates, or ask why I wasn't helping out more like Jennifer, who never lifted a finger. "City life too fancy for you," he'd taunt, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Jennifer piled on, mocking my thrift store clothes, or asking if I still smelled like diner grease. Mom would force a smile, urging me to just get along, and I'd bite my tongue, not wanting to break her heart. But the cracks were showing. Each visit left me angrier, not just at Richard, but at myself for letting him walk over me. I'd lie awake in my tiny Chicago apartment, replaying his insults, feeling the weight of years spent trying to prove I was enough. Lisa, now working with me on freelance projects, saw it eating at me. "You're letting that jerk define you," she said one night over pizza and cheap wine. "You built a career from nothing. He's got no right to treat you like that." She was right, but I didn't know how to fight back yet. I kept visiting Mom hoping for a change, but Richard's control only tightened. He'd brag about his media empire, Bennett Media Solutions, a Chicago giant worth $50 million, acting like I could never understand his world. Stick to your little computer stuff, he'd say, dismissing my work like it was a hobby. The worst came during those family dinners where Richard played king at the head of the table. He'd quiz me about my odd jobs, twisting my answers to make me sound small, while Jennifer tossed in snide remarks about my cute ambition. Mom stayed quiet, her eyes fixed on her plate, and I'd grip my fork tighter, forcing a smile to keep the peace. But inside, I was screaming. I wasn't just some Tennessee kid anymore. I'd coded campaigns for major brands, earned $30,000 a year on my own terms, and taught myself skills Richard couldn't dream of. Yet to him, I was nothing but a servant to order around. Those dinners became a test of endurance, each one chipping away at my patience until that Christmas party, the night he crossed a line I couldn't ignore. By then I was already tinkering with an idea. A tech platform for personalized ads, something that could shake up the industry. I'd sketched it out late at night, fueled by coffee and frustration, but I hadn't taken it seriously. Not until Richard's voice rang out that night, calling me a maid in front of everyone. That was the spark I needed. I left the party early, my hands shaking as I drove back to my apartment, not with tears, but with resolve. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not just code, but a plan. I'd build something bigger than Richard's empire, something that'd make him see me as more than a nobody. The next morning, I called Lisa, my voice steady for the first time in months. "I'm done playing small," I told her. "I'm starting a company, and I'm taking him down." Every time I stepped into my mom's condo in Chicago, I braced myself for Richard's jabs. Subtle at first, then sharper like a blade he enjoyed twisting. He'd hand me a stack of dirty plates mid-conversation, saying, "You're good at this, Sarah. Handle it." I'd grit my teeth and comply, not for him, but for Mom, whose tired eyes begged me to keep the peace. Jennifer, his daughter, made it worse, tossing her napkin on the floor and smirking as I bent to pick it up. "Still got that small-town hustle," she'd quip, her voice dripping with mockery. I wasn't their servant, but Richard acted like I was born to serve. A nobody from Tennessee who'd never match his world of million-dollar deals and penthouse parties. It started small, those early visits after I moved to Chicago. I'd show up with takeout or flowers, hoping to reconnect with Mom, but Richard turned every moment into a power play. Once, while I was sharing a story about a tech project that earned me $5,000, he cut me off. "Why don't you help your mother clear the table? We're done eating." His tone was casual, but his eyes said I didn't belong at their table. Mom glanced down, stirring her coffee, and Jennifer stifled a laugh. I carried the dishes to the kitchen, my face burning, telling myself it wasn't worth a fight. But each time I let it slide, Richard pushed further, as if testing how low he could make me feel. He loved an audience. At family dinners, he'd parade his success. Bennett Media Solutions, a powerhouse worth $60 million, contracts with Fortune 500 companies, and then turn to me with a fake smile. "So Sarah's still tinkering with those little websites." He'd lean back, sipping his wine, knowing my freelance work couldn't compete in his eyes. Jennifer would jump in, asking if I'd upgraded from that thrift store jacket, yet her giggles echoing as Mom stayed silent. I'd force a smile, my nails digging into my palms, answering with stats about my latest ad campaign that pulled in $10,000. Richard would nod absently, already changing the subject, dismissing me like I was background noise. Lisa saw how it wore me down. Over coffee at my apartment, I'd vent about Richard's latest dig, like the time he asked me to mop up a spill during a barbecue, saying, "You're used to this kind of work, right?" Lisa slammed her mug down. "He's a bully, Sarah, and you're letting him win. You're smarter than he'll ever be. Start acting like it." Her words stuck, but I wasn't ready to push back. I kept visiting, hoping Mom would speak up, but she never did. She'd hug me tightly when I left, whispering, "I'm so proud of you," but in Richard's presence she shrank, her voice lost under his control. I hated it, not just for me, but for her. The tension built over months, each visit a reminder of my place in Richard's hierarchy. He'd send me to fetch his coat, or pour drinks for guests' tasks he'd never ask of Jennifer, who lounged with her phone untouched by his demands. Once at a cocktail party for his colleagues, he introduced Jennifer as my brilliant daughter headed for Harvard, then gestured vaguely at me. And Sarah, she's helping out tonight. I was 28, running my own tech gigs worth $15,000 a year, but to him, I was the help. His colleagues barely glanced my way, and I swallowed the urge to scream, stacking glasses in the kitchen while Jennifer posed for photos. By late fall, I was done pretending it didn't hurt. I'd built a life from nothing, coded apps for major brands, saved $20,000 for my own place, but Richard's voice still made me feel small. I started dodging their invites, claiming work deadlines, but Mom's calls pulled me back. "Just come for Christmas," she pleaded. "It's important to me." I agreed, promising myself I'd stay calm no matter what Richard threw at me. I spent days preparing, bought a new dress, rehearsed talking points about my latest project, thinking maybe this time he'd see me as more than a servant. I was wrong. The Christmas party was at their condo, decked out with lights and a towering tree, guests in suits and sequins filling the space. I arrived early, helping Mom set up, arranging platters and pouring wine. Richard barely acknowledged me, too busy schmoozing with clients worth millions. Jennifer flitted around, charming everyone, her laughter sharp as glass. As the night wore on, I cleared empty plates, keeping the place tidy for Mom's sake. I was stacking dishes by the sink when Richard's voice cut through the chatter. "The maid doesn't need to stand here, Sarah. Get back to the kitchen." He pointed at me, his grin wide like he'd landed a punchline. The room went quiet, guests exchanging glances, some chuckling awkwardly. Jennifer snorted, covering her mouth, while Mom froze, her hands clutching a napkin. I stood there, plates in hand, my heart pounding, not with shame, but rage. I'd spent years swallowing his insults, smiling through his games, but this was different. He'd said it in front of everyone, stripping me bare with one sentence. I set the plates down, slowly meeting his gaze, my voice steady, despite the fire inside. "I'm not your maid, Richard." His smirk faltered, but he waved it off, turning back to his guests. "Just a joke, folks. Let's eat." The party resumed, but I was done. I grabbed my coat, ignoring Mom's whispered pleas to stay, and walked out into the cold Chicago night. In my car, I didn't cry. I planned. Richard thought he could break me, but he'd just lit a fuse. I called Lisa before I even reached my apartment. "I'm starting that ad platform I told you about," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm going to make Richard regret ever opening his mouth." Lisa didn't hesitate. "I'm in. Let's build it." That night, I pulled out my laptop, sketching the framework for Mitchell Analytics, a tool to revolutionize personalized ads, something I knew could rival Richard's empire. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every moment he'd made me feel like nothing, for every time Mom looked away, for the girl who'd scrubbed floors to survive. Richard had no idea what was coming. That Christmas night, when Richard's words branded me a maid in front of everyone, I didn't just walk away. I started running toward something bigger. My laptop glowed in the dark of my Chicago apartment as I poured my anger into Mitchell Analytics, the ad platform I'd been sketching for months. I wasn't just building a company, I was building a weapon, one that'd make Richard see me as more than the nobody he mocked. Lisa was on board from day one, brainstorming over late-night calls, her voice crackling with excitement. "This is your shot, Sarah. Make it count." I knew she was right, but I also knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed connections, capital, and a plan sharp enough to cut through Richard's empire. A month later, I registered for a tech conference in Chicago, a gamble that cost me $2,000 I barely had. The place was a maze of suits and buzzword startup founders pitching to investors with million-dollar smiles. I felt out of place in my off-the-rack blazer, my nerves screaming I didn't belong, but I pushed through, clutching my pitch deck for Mitchell Analytics. It was a tool to personalize ads in real time, using data to hit audiences with precision, a game changer for brands. I'd coded the prototype myself, testing it with small clients who paid me $5,000 for early access. The numbers were promising, but I needed more than promise to take on Richard. That's when I met Karen Walsh. She was 50, sharp-eyed and commanding a panel on venture capital with a voice that silenced the room. Her bio read like a battle map. Started a tech fund after clawing her way out of a marriage where her in-laws treated her like an outsider. I lingered after her talk, heart pounding, and handed her my business card. "I've got a platform that could disrupt ad tech," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She raised an eyebrow, scanning me like she could see my entire story. "Send me your deck," she said, slipping my card into her pocket. I left the conference buzzing, not daring to hope, but 2 days later Karen emailed, "Let's meet. Your idea has legs." Our first meeting was at a downtown cafe, Karen sipping espresso while I laid out my vision. Mitchell Analytics could scale to handle billion-dollar ad campaigns, I told her, showing data from my prototype that boosted client conversions by 30%. She leaned forward, asking about my revenue. $15,000 so far, and my bottlenecks, coding capacity, server costs. Her questions were brutal, slicing through my pitch, but respectful, like she saw potential I hadn't fully grasped. "You're onto something, Sarah, but you're playing too safe," she said. "With the right backing, this could be huge, bigger than the dinosaurs running this industry." I knew she meant companies like Bennett Media Solutions, and my pulse quickened. "I want huge," I replied, meeting her gaze. She smiled, a rare approving thing, and promised to connect me with her investor network. Karen was true to her word. Over the next 6 months, she mentored me, introducing me to venture capitalists who could fund my growth. Lisa and I worked around the clock, her marketing skills turning my code into a story investors couldn't ignore. We hired Mark Evans, a 32-year-old data scientist I'd met freelancing, whose knack for algorithms made our platform faster and smarter. Together, we pushed Mitchell Analytics to handle 10 million ad impressions daily, pulling in $50,000 in revenue from mid-sized clients. The late nights blurred together, coding, pitching, debugging, but every milestone felt like a brick in the wall I was building against Richard's world. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from Mom's condo, dodging Richard's invites with excuses about work. Mom called sometimes, her voice soft and worried, asking why I hadn't visited. "I'm swamped, Mom." New project, I'd say, hating the half-truth. I couldn't face Richard's smirk or Jennifer's snide comments, not when I was pouring everything into my company. Lisa noticed my mood darkening after those calls. "You're not just building this for you?" she said one night, handing me a beer. "You're doing it for your mom, too. To show her you're more than what he says." Her words hit hard, and I nodded, refocusing on the plan. Mitchell Analytics wasn't just a startup. It was my way out of Richard's shadow. Then came the break I hadn't expected. I was at a tech meetup networking with founders when Rebecca Holt approached me. She was a 40-year-old tech journalist with a reputation for sniffing out corporate secrets. "I've been digging into Bennett Media Solutions," she said, her voice low. "They're in trouble. Bad investments, losing clients, hiding it from shareholders." My heart skipped. Richard's company, valued at $70 million, was his crown jewel, the thing he lorded over me. Rebecca handed me a USB drive. "Take a look. Might be useful for someone with your ambition." I thanked her, my mind racing, and rushed home to plug it in. The files were a goldmine: financial reports showing losses of $10 million, emails about desperate loans, and a board scrambling to cover it up. I called Karen the next morning, my voice shaking with possibility. "Bennett Media's sinking. We could buy it." She didn't laugh or dismiss me. She asked for the data. We met that afternoon, poring over Rebecca's files, crunching numbers. "It's risky," Karen said, "but with the right strategy, we could pull it off. Their assets are still worth $40 million. We'd need a holding company to mask your involvement." I nodded, adrenaline surging. This wasn't just about proving Richard wrong. It was about taking his throne. Karen proposed Phoenix Partners, a shell company she'd used for acquisitions, and offered to front $10 million of her own capital if I could raise $5 million through my network. The next 3 months were a blur. I pitched to every investor Karen introduced, showing Mitchell Analytics' growth, now at $100,000 in revenue, and the potential to absorb Bennett Media's clients. Mark optimized our platform to handle their scale, while Lisa crafted a pitch deck that sold the vision a new era of ad tech led by us. We secured the $5 million mostly from Karen's contacts who saw the numbers and trusted her track record. I barely slept, fueled by coffee and the thought of Richard's face when he'd learn the truth. Every contract I signed, every dollar we raised was a step closer to flipping his world upside down. By summer, Phoenix Partners had a deal in place, a $35 million acquisition of Bennett Media Solutions structured to keep my name out of the public filings. Karen's lawyers handled the details, ensuring Richard wouldn't suspect me until it was too late. I met with their interim CEO, posing as a tech consultant, asking pointed questions about their operations. He admitted their staff turnover was high, talented execs leaving because of management issues. I knew he meant Richard's ego, and I hid my smile, filing it away for later. When I left, I called Karen. "It's happening. We're doing this." She laughed, a rare sound. "You're not just playing the game, Sarah. You're rewriting it." That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the signed acquisition papers, my hands trembling. Mitchell Analytics was now worth $2 million on its own, but this deal would put me in control of Richard's empire. I thought back to that Christmas party. His voice, his smirk, his finger pointing me to the kitchen. He'd thought he'd broken me, but he'd only built me stronger. I wasn't just Sarah from Tennessee anymore. I was the woman who'd make him greet me every morning at the office he once ruled. The stage was set, and I was ready to step into the spotlight. The boardroom of Bennett Media Solutions was all glass and steel, a monument to Richard's ego, and I stood outside it, my heart steady, but my palms damp. Months of planning, late nights coding Mitchell Analytics, raising $5 million, securing the $35 million acquisition through Phoenix Partners, had led to this moment. I'd kept my name hidden, posing as a consultant to avoid tipping Richard off. But today, the mask came off. I adjusted my blazer, bought new for this occasion, and pushed open the door, ready to rewrite the rules of his world. Inside, Richard sat at the head of the table, his gray hair slicked back, commanding the room as he droned on about quarterly projections. The board, 10 suits with tired eyes, nodded along, unaware their company had bled $10 million in losses. Jennifer perched to his right, her notepad untouched, throwing coy smiles at a young exec. Susan wasn't there. Mom rarely attended these meetings, a fact that stung but didn't surprise me. I slipped into a seat at the far end, my presence barely registering until Richard glanced my way, his brow furrowing. "Sarah, this is a closed session. What are you doing here?" His voice carried that familiar edge, the one that used to make me shrink. I smiled, calm, deliberate, and opened my laptop. "I'm here on behalf of Phoenix Partners, the new majority owner of Bennett Media Solutions." The room went still, pens pausing, mid-scribble, eyes darting between me and Richard. His face hardened, a flush creeping up his neck. "That's absurd," he snapped. "I'd know if my company was sold. Who authorized this?" I slid a stack of documents across the table. The acquisition papers Karen's lawyers had finalized weeks ago. "It's done, Richard. As of yesterday, Phoenix Partners holds 51% of the shares, valued at $35 million. Jennifer snorted, tossing her hair. "You running a lemonade stand's more your speed, Sarah." Her giggle broke the tension, but I didn't flinch, pulling up a slide on my laptop. Mitchell Analytics metrics showing $150,000 in revenue and 10 million daily ad impressions. "My company, Mitchell Analytics, designed the tech that'll integrate with your assets." I said, my voice steady. "We've already signed contracts to replace your failing campaigns, saving this company from the $10 million hole you dug." The board leaned forward, murmuring as Richard's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the table. He stood pointing at me, his voice rising. "This is a stunt. You don't have the experience or the capital for this." Who's really behind it? I met his glare unflinching and gestured to the documents. Read them. Phoenix Partners is my partnership with Karen Walsh, a venture capitalist you might have heard of considering she's funded companies worth $1 billion. Karen's name hit like a shockwave. Even Richard couldn't dismiss her. He sank back into his chair, flipping through the papers, his face paling as the truth sank in. Jennifer's smirk vanished, her eyes wide, darting to her father for a rebuttal that didn't come. The board chair, a gray-haired woman named Ellen, cleared her throat. "Ms. Mitchell, you're claiming operational control?" I nodded, projecting a new slide. My vision for Bennett Media Solutions: streamlined campaigns, better staff retention, and a culture of respect. Effective immediately, I'm overseeing strategic decisions. Richard will report to me directly. And yes, that includes greeting me each morning in the office. A gasp rippled through the room, followed by stifled laughs from a few execs. Richard's eyes blazed, but he stayed silent, his knuckles white. I'd planned that line for months, not to humiliate him, but to remind him who held the power now. Jennifer couldn't resist. "You're delusional. Dad built this company from nothing. You're just a glorified coder playing dress-up." I turned to her, my voice sharp but calm. "Your dad lost $10 million hiding bad deals. My platform's already pulling in clients you couldn't keep. Check the numbers." I clicked to a graph showing our contracts with 3 major brands worth $2 million each. Jennifer's mouth opened, then closed, her face flushing as the board scribbled notes. Ellen nodded, impressed, and asked about my timeline for restructuring. I laid it out: 6 months to stabilize, a year to dominate, feeling Richard's stare burn into me. When the meeting ended, the board filed out, some shaking my hand, others whispering about the new blood. Richard stayed seated, staring at the table, his pride in tatters. Jennifer stormed out, muttering about small-town trash, but I didn't care. I was packing my laptop when Susan appeared at the door, her face pale, eyes wet. "Sarah, how did this happen? Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked, and for a moment I softened, remembering her hugs in Tennessee. But I straightened, keeping my distance. "I tried to tell you, Mom, for years. You never stood up to him." She flinched, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending it's okay." She nodded, tears falling, and left without another word. It hurt. More than I expected. But I couldn't carry her silence anymore. Richard finally stood, his voice low, almost a growl. "You think you've won? This company's my legacy. You'll crash it in a year." I faced him, my chin high. "Your legacy was failing. I'm saving it, and you'll follow my rules or find another job." His eyes narrowed, but he walked out, his shoulders slumped, a man deflated. I exhaled, the weight of years lifting, replaced by a fire I hadn't felt before. Later at my apartment, Lisa and Mark cracked open beers, toasting what they called the takedown of the century. I laughed, but my mind was already on the next steps. New hires, client pitches, a staff handbook with a respect clause I'd insisted on. Karen called, her voice warm. "You didn't just win, Sarah. You changed the game." Ready for phase 2, I grinned, staring out at Chicago's skyline. Born ready. That night, I thought of Richard's face, the shock in his eyes, and Jennifer's silenced snark. They'd underestimated me for years, but I'd turned their world upside down. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about proving I was more than the maid they saw, more than the girl scrubbing floors in Tennessee. I'd taken Richard's empire not to destroy it, but to rebuild it better. And every morning when he'd walk into that office and say, "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," it'd be a reminder. Not just for him, but for me. I'd earned my place, and no one could take it away. 6 months after I turned Richard's world upside down in that boardroom, I packed my Chicago apartment and moved to Seattle. Not running away, but running toward a life I'd built on my own terms. Mitchell Analytics was no longer a late-night dream. It was a global brand pulling in $2 million in revenue and serving 20 million ad impressions daily. I'd traded Chicago's gray skyline for Seattle's misty mountains, setting up our headquarters in a sleek office overlooking Puget Sound. The move wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a declaration. I was done living in Richard's shadow, done carrying the weight of his insults or Mom's silence. Seattle felt like a fresh start. Lisa moved with me, her marketing genius driving our campaigns to new heights, while Mark Evans stayed in Chicago to manage our Midwest clients, his algorithms keeping our platform razor sharp. Karen Walsh became more than a mentor. She was a partner, splitting her time between Seattle and San Francisco, guiding me through billion-dollar negotiations with brands I'd once only dreamed of pitching. Together, we turned Mitchell Analytics into a powerhouse valued at $10 million with a team of 50 and growing. Every milestone, new contracts, new hires, reminded me of that Christmas night when Richard called me a maid, thinking he'd broken me. He hadn't. He'd forged me. I didn't cut ties with Chicago completely. Bennett Media Solutions, now under my control through Phoenix Partners, was thriving after the restructuring I'd promised. We'd slashed inefficiencies, signed deals worth $5 million, and boosted staff morale with policies I'd written myself. Respect clauses, fair promotions, no more egos, like Richard's. He stayed on as an exec, his role diminished, but his paycheck intact. During my quarterly visits to Chicago, he'd greet me at the office door, his good morning. Ms. Mitchell clipped and forced his eyes, avoiding mine. It wasn't petty satisfaction I felt, it was closure. Every forced hello was a reminder of what I'd overcome, not just for me, but for the girl who'd scrubbed floors in Tennessee dreaming of more. Jennifer faded from my life. She'd called once after the boardroom showdown, spitting venom about how I'd stolen her father's company. I didn't argue, I just hung up. Her taunts, once sharp as knives, were now background noise. Mom was harder. She sent letters to Seattle, her handwriting shaky, apologizing for not standing up to Richard. I read them late at night, my heart aching, but I didn't reply. I loved her, but her silence had hurt too much, and I needed space to heal. Maybe one day we'd talk, but not yet. I'd built a new family, Lisa, Mark, Karen, people who saw my worth without me begging for it. I poured my energy into something bigger than myself. Last spring, I launched the Mitchell Foundation, a nonprofit to fund first-generation entrepreneurs, especially women from small towns like mine. We'd already granted $100,000 to 10 startups, each founder reminding me of my younger self. Hungry, scrappy, underestimated. At our first gala, I stood on stage, the spotlight warm against my skin, and shared my story. I was called a maid in my own mother's home. I said, my voice steady, but I didn't let that define me. You don't need anyone's permission to shine. Your worth is yours to claim. The crowd roared, and I felt lighter, like I'd finally shed the last of Richard's chains. Richard's world kept shrinking. Rebecca Holt, the journalist who'd tipped me off, published a piece on Bennett Media's near collapse, hinting at his mismanagement without naming me. He called me after it, ran his voice tight with rage. "You're destroying my reputation," he said. I laughed, a real free laugh, and replied, "You did that yourself. I just saved your company." He hung up, and I didn't hear from him again, except through those morning greetings, each one a small victory. He'd never admit it, but I'd earned his respect, or at least his fear. Seattle became home in ways Chicago never could. I bought a loft with a view of the water, its open space filled with books and art I'd chosen, not hand-me-downs from Richard's world. Lisa and I hiked Rainier on weekends, her laughter echoing through the trees, while Mark visited monthly, bringing Chicago pizza and bad jokes. Karen invited me to her beach house for strategy sessions, her sharp mind pushing me to dream bigger. "You're not done yet," she'd say, and I'd nod, knowing she was right. Mitchell Analytics was just the start. I wanted to reshape the industry, prove that someone like me could lead without losing her soul. Standing on that gala stage, I thought back to Tennessee. The girl threading needles in Mom's shop, the teenager juggling jobs to survive the woman Richard tried to break. Every step, every scar had led me here. I didn't need his approval, or mom's voice to feel whole. I'd built my own table surrounded by people who valued me, and that was enough. My journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my worth, proving it to myself first. Richard's greetings were just a bonus, a quiet nod to the power I'd earned. If you're watching this and someone's made you feel small, know this: your value doesn't come from their words. It's in your fight, your grit, your refusal to dim your light. Build your own path, surround yourself with those who lift you up, and don't look back. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and I went from a maid in my mother's home to a leader who made her stepfather greet her every morning. You can rewrite your story too. Start today.